Okay, so we're here with Lauren Rabaino, the mobile app developer from the Seattle Times. Really honored to have her talking with our students. It's quite a thrill, especially after meeting her at O&A. So I guess right off the bat, talk a little bit about the mobile philosophy at the Seattle Times. How important is it to the newspaper, and what are y'all doing at the Times to make it happen?
Right. So I'm part of the news applications team at the Seattle Times, which news applications teams around the country are generally known for being the little hubs of innovation who are thinking about things before the rest of the organization is thinking about things. So to ask what the Seattle Times as a whole is doing and thinking about mobile, it's been really slow, as it has been at many newspapers. For the first time, we're finally prioritizing it here. We have a mobile HTML5 app that is fairly new. It works on tablet and smartphones. We have a mobile site that is accessible at a separate URL. We do not have a responsive site, but that is a priority for us. So what the Seattle Times News Applications team is doing, though, we're building out all of our special projects, anything from mapping to immersive storytelling, any type of resource guides, any reader engagement stuff. We're building all of that kind of outside of the reservation and experimenting on our own platforms that are not commonly adopted platforms at the Seattle Times. And everything we're doing there, we're doing in a very mobile-friendly fashion. The mantra that I've kind of stolen from Brian Boyer at NPR is that if it doesn't work on mobile, it doesn't work at all, and which is very true with mobile usage increasing, with mobile usage not only being limited to people on the go, but to any people sitting on their couches or at a restaurant. So everything we're doing is designed responsively. So interactive graphics, full on immersive storytelling stuff. It's all accessible on your phone, and that's the direction that we kind of want to go to company-wide, as being an innovative little hub. We're the first ones to do it, so maybe only a handful of projects right now you'll see taking that approach, but that's where we're going.
What types of projects or stories have you seen that have lend themselves perfectly to your mobile development?
So actually, if I can just show you a few things that we've worked on, ideally, anything that you're doing should lend itself to mobile, right? Because everything that you're doing should work on mobile. The real trick to that is being able to structure your data in a way where you can easily grab it and repurpose it to work for mobile. So here's an example of a project that we did. And the desktop layout, as you can see, it's really made for these big, beautiful photos that we have. We brought in the mayoral candidates for this year's general election and brought them into the studio and photographed them for this app specifically. There's a beautiful, side-by-side comparison. You can compare where they stand on the issues. You can toggle through, who they are as people, how they got through the primary. But when you open this up onto a mobile phone, which looks something closer to this, you can see that it rearranges. And the content is all still there and is still fully accessible, because that's kind of sorry, I'm going to cover your face there, distracting me. The spirit of, being able to do mobile development is that you're not presenting a light version or a dumbed down version, a simplified version. You're presenting the full content that someone would see on a desktop site, but you're seeing it in a view that's more tailored to the small screen size of a phone. So this big layout with two huge photos side by side on your phone, you would have no room for the content. So really, when you ask what kind of content types lend themselves to this, it's really the kind of content that is well structured, where you can manipulate basically how the data displays in different places. So if this had just been one blog post with one long stream of text, you wouldn't be able to do that, because you couldn't take little pieces and reposition them and do something different with them, repackage them.
Have y'all found anything, or have y'all discussed in your newsroom that balance between responsive design and actual app development, building a native app? What made y'all go to the responsive route?
Right. So the reason we wanted to go the responsive route is because most of our traffic to our, I mean, if anyone clicks on a Twitter link, on a Facebook link, on a link from email or chat via their phone, they're going to end up in the browser. They're not going to end up at a mobile application. For us, it was like the first step toward modernizing our content and our systems. I think that next we probably will do mobile apps, like native apps that are more tailored to specific niches, maybe around politics, around sports specifically. We have a huge following around the Seahawks here and the Husky football team. So creating more niche-based apps, but for the content itself, most people are accessing it through these social channels, or even from their email, through our email newsletters. So being able to just access the basic website is the first thing. That's our priority right now. And the other cool thing about mobile design is that it kind of forces you to think about what's actually important, right? So we're like rethinking all of our stuff, like what appears on mobile, and we get to cut out a lot of the crap that we had slowly just started adding onto our site because, why not? You have the space to display it. Let's throw a widget there, and it just becomes like a Christmas tree, just ornaments hung all off of it. So now we're really focusing on, does it display on this tiny screen this big? And if it doesn't, should it? And if it shouldn't, then why would we display it on the desktop site if it's not that important? So it's really forcing us to prioritize our content strategy as well.
Describe, we hear a lot about, what a reporter does on a day-to-day basis or what a anchor does on a day-to-day basis. What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, I have a very crazy job because I'm like the youngest editor at the Seattle Times, and I'm one of the few people whose job it is to be continually, like, I'm not doing the day-to-day churn. I mean, I do a little bit of that, but I'm really supposed to be thinking long-term about, like, the structures and our storytelling direction that we're going for digital. So in one day, I might go to a story planning meeting. I might have meetings with reporters and editors about a project that they want to work on. I might be having a meeting with a developer about the progress on a current project. I also will probably be in some type of code editor actually doing some of the front-end code for some of these projects, or working in Photoshop or some type of wireframing software to come up with the visual design concepts for something, or in a stakeholder review, reviewing the meeting after the fact. So in my role, I see projects from the ideation phase when we're starting to think of a good idea, all the way through each iteration of fleshing out that idea to the actual hands-on coding, building it, to the promotion plans for social media, working with our social media editors, to the reviews where we go back and look at what worked and what didn't and try to figure out what to do next time. So I'm involved in all areas of that spectrum. But I work very close in the heart of the newsroom, working with editors daily on all my projects.
So y'all are in the newsroom. You're not in a separate cubby hole hidden away from everyone.
No. I'm right in the heart of, so we have an area in the Seattle Times newsroom called the Hub, which is where all the production people sit and the editors sit. If I'm really immersed in some type of breaking project, I'll be sitting right in the middle of that hub. But my desk and the developers I work with, we're right on the periphery of that. So we're almost right in the middle of the newsroom.
So we met at O&A this past year, where you dominated in a good way a panel on mobile apps in newsrooms, and it's no secret that the tech world is a male-dominated field. So it was really awesome to see not only a female up there, but a young female. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I can say that I graduated from college in 2009, but I also graduated early.
Okay, so you're only a couple of years older than the students we have in our class right now, which is a really great, mentor or someone to look up to. So what's it been like being a young female in the tech world, and what advice would you give to, students in classes like ours where they're about 50-50, male and female, and there are just as many females interested in coding and in this side of the business than there are males?
Mm-hmm. So being a young person in a newsroom, especially a young woman, is really, really hard, especially in the kind of role that I'm in, where people in the newsroom tend to be really open and excited about that, and they're looking toward young people. But being a digital leader in the newsroom doesn't only mean you're working with the newsroom. At a newspaper, you have to work with people in IT, people in sales and marketing. You have to work with all different facets of the company. And that's really hard because newspapers are used to looking toward the young people for the answers. But in very traditional legacy type sales and marketing environments, it's all built on seniority and experience, and it's just these old structures of leadership. And it's very uncommon to see a young person sitting in a meeting of executives. So it gets, I think, a little uncomfortable for some people. Honestly, I just have had to prove myself by doing really good work, showing my work. The way that I even got to the position that I'm in now, when I was in school, even though it wasn't that long ago, we didn't have the kind of classes that you're teaching. We were not even talking about mobile at all. So your education doesn't stop in the classroom, and it doesn't stop when you're done with college. I had to teach myself a lot while I was still in school. And everything has already changed since 2009. Like everything that I would have thought should have been on a curriculum in 2009 has already completely evolved to today. So I would say that if you want to be a leader in a newsroom, male or female, learn how to teach yourself. Learn how to be a self-learner. Learn how to evolve your thinking. Learn how to just Google things and figure it out on your own.
Well, what are some of your favorite resources that you use for coding or mobile advice or lessons?
Honestly, I don't have any go-to places. I don't have like, oh, here's my one place I have to go to learn about this. I Google problems as they arise. I usually end up on sites like Stack Overflow, which is a forum for posting tech questions. For WordPress development, which we do a fair amount of, I always end up on the WordPress forums and the Codex, which fully documents all of that. For our Django stuff, the Django docs are a good resource if you know what you're looking for. But I usually just end up troubleshooting error messages. Another great resource, if you want to learn and you have specific questions around data analysis or like where to start, the very basics, the NICAR listserv is a great place to go. It's full of like geeky journalists who just want to like answer all your questions all day. You'll always get a response from someone if you post there, and they're looking at it from a journalistic lens, so they can help you through like cultural struggles or like FOIA struggles and stuff like that. And really just like Twitter, if there's something that I need, I go to my Twitter. There's a Twitter list that I follow. I think it's created by Greg Lynch. It's called Journo Hackers. And I kind of just scroll through that list and see like who would know the answer to this. And I usually DM them and say, hey, can we talk for a few minutes? I'm just struggling with something. So there's a great network out there of coder journalists who want to help other people.
Yeah, and we try to tell our students, and before you contact us, have you Googled it yet? Which sounds like we're trying to pass the buck, but that's so important for them to learn how to figure it out on their own.
Right, exactly. That has been my greatest resource because there's no one here that I can really learn from about a lot of these things. So it's just me trying to figure it out on my own.
So this class in particular is not one where they have to build a mobile app. We do have other classes where they get into some of that, but we do get them thinking about the mobile app process or, mobile in general terms. Describe the process you all go through when you're building something for mobile, whether it's in the app form or not, and what resources you may have for students. I have a couple of students who are in the app building process right now, and they're starting from scratch. So talk about some of the pitfalls they may have and how to overcome those, and your general attitude toward the process as a whole.
All right, so all of the mobile stuff we've done has only been web apps to this point, or web apps that end up like in some type of wrapper turned into an iOS app. I haven't specifically been involved in this, so my entire perspective comes from like the responsive design standpoint. Our workflow for doing that as of late has been a completely mobile-first workflow. So at ONE, I talked about the second screen experience for our Seahawks app, which was an app that lets you follow a game live, see all the stats in real time, all that kind of stuff. So basically, we always start with a mission statement. Like, what is the goal of this? Because it's really easy to get bogged down and like, okay, where's this tab going to go and how are you going to swipe it? But sometimes you lose sight of like, what is the real goal and who is the real user and how do we want them to use this information? So we always start with just a list of like, what's the purpose? Who are our users? What do our users need? How do we get that information to them? After we've defined that list, every feature that we decide that we want to build has to directly tie into one of those key core mission statements we defined in the beginning. So usually, I mean, that sounds really official, but that's like a 5-minute, like, okay, what do we want to do? How are we going to do it? It's just a conversation you have. You jot it down on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and then we immediately just start sketching. And at that point, it's all brainstorm. You know, we have these little sketch sheets that you can just Google them, responsive sketch sheets, and they show you all different browser sizes. And we start with the mobile size and just pound out sketches. Like, it could do this, it could do this, it could do this, and don't think too hard or dwell on any one of those sketches. Just kind of get as many ideas as you can out there and then throw them on the table and pick apart the pieces that you want. So it's a little bit different here building a mobile app than it would be in a classroom environment where you're kind of working solo and don't really have constraints. There's a lot of politics in a newsroom, and every person imaginable needs to be involved. So I will skip through the part where you have like 10 stakeholder meetings and get right to we just start building it, and we build we do it all in a grid-based framework, so you can look up things like Foundation or Bootstrap are really good frameworks to start with that have a lot of elements defined. There's a deprecated grid system that used to be really good, and we've modified it to work a little better, called the 1140 grid system. And basically just start with a mobile view and define the content that's going to go in that mobile view, design it, and then build out from there. And as you get wider on screen size, you can add features. But I guess like pitfalls, things
beyond management wanting their fingers involved with everything,
which is going to happen anywhere. So you should learn how to deal with that. You know, we've tried to do some really fancy stuff, like with swiping with multi-touch, where you can like swipe through a page to get to the next one. And we found that, you know, people just are going to use the tabs anyway. Like, just be very cognizant of doing stuff that's practical and usable before you get to the whiz bang. And if you do decide to do the whiz bang stuff, make sure that it has a true purpose and it adds value to the kind of content that you're doing.
That's good advice for newsrooms in general, not just mobile, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that recently, over the top. One thing that we kind of had forgotten about in our first app that we did was that people can turn their phone this way too. And so we launched an app that was really designed for this, and we tested it that way and spent a lot of time on it, and then turned our phone sideways and realized it was completely broken. So just keeping in mind and just not forgetting about all the different ways that people can use their phones. What else? What are our biggest pitfalls? I'm still so new to it that it's really hard for me to speak with authority. I mean, everyone's still trying to figure it out, right? And even in my presentation at ONA, I crossed out the word expert and wrote complete noob, because really I feel like I have no authority on the topic except the fact that I've tried it a few times, I've broken things a few times, and then tried again. So that's about as far as my experience. It's just like, don't be afraid to try and break things and
fix them.
And then fix them, preferably.
So last question, and it's not necessarily mobile related. It's more this new age of journalism. You're the perfect person to tell our students best advice for succeeding in this new era. You know, you've only been on the job market for a couple of years now, but you're already incredibly successful. So what would you tell them to do in order to get ahead of the competitors they're going to be facing in the field?
Mm-hmm. So I just went through a round of reading dozens upon dozens of internship applications for the summer. Every time I go through an application, the first thing, I mean, if somebody lists that they know how to do social media and they know how to use Google Analytics and they know how to use Microsoft Word, those are not impressive things these days to have. People who actually build things and create things, not just use things that other people have created. Those are the people who capture my attention. People who are actually thinking, like really, really critically thinking about how we can reinvent this industry. I think we saw a lot more of it, my generation, like 4 years ago, because we were involved. We were around a time like before Twitter really took off for news. It was like we were able to witness the reinvention, and we wanted to have our hands in it. But what I'm seeing a lot from students, even just a few years later, is that they're seeing a lot of the stuff already defined for them, and people are already talking about how to use social media. So there's not a lot of critical thinking about like, well, what's next and how do we change it? So honestly, what's gotten me where I am, and I can attribute every job opportunity that I've had, every freelance gig, every speaking gig, like every professional opportunity that I've had since I graduated has directly been tied back to something that I blogged about on my website. So I tend to think a lot. I get really obsessive about like, oh my God, what's the future of journalism? Like, what are we going to do? How do we fix this? What are the problems? And people are really interested in hearing about those solutions. And everybody right now is trying to hire for the people who can try to come up with those solutions. So my best advice to you for getting your name out there and getting a job is to have a website where you're contributing to our community, where you're coming up with ideas, trying to figure out solutions, and then actually like building stuff. Because ideas only get you so far. If you're actually able to execute on those, even if you're just, a lot of the stuff I've done is just gluing, popsicle sticks together. It's just like random code that just random things hodgepodge together, but it works. So you don't have to be the best coder in the world, though that does help. But if you can be really creative and come up with solutions and really think about the problems and document your thought process and open source that and like share it with the world to try to learn from what you're thinking about, I think that you're going to go really far. But also, learn to code. Like, coding is the new literacy. So like at least the basics is really good if you have a grasp. If you can just create one thing, or if you can do really strong data analysis, or, file a FOIA and like create a few bar charts, like that statistics get you a long way too.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to share your wisdom and expertise with our students. And
thank you. And tell Fred that it was my duty as a journalist to set the record straight.
I called him out in class during a break. It's like, come on, Fred, Nick Silver, come on. So, but thank you so much, and I apologize. I apologize for all the technical problems. I'm glad we got it worked out.
It's no problem. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
Bye.
Bye.